Jewish Democrat suing Harvard over anti-Semitism, chastises his party for inaction, endorses Trump. A Jewish Democrat who is suing Harvard over anti-Semitism on campus following the October 7 terrorist attacks in Israel explained to Fox News Digital his decision to endorse former President Donald Trump. Watch this.
My name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. I'm a recent Harvard graduate. I guess you would say I'm a political or Jewish activist. And the day I turned 18, I registered to vote as a Democrat. I've only voted for Democrats, whether it was Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Jamal Bowman, Elliot Engel. And to sort of paraphrase Ronald Reagan, I don't feel that I've abandoned the Democratic Party. I do feel that the Democratic Party abandoned me. And that is because I still believe in a lot of progressive policies. I believe in a $15 minimum wage. I believe in reproductive choices for women. I believe in progressive taxation. But at the end of the day, when American Jewry is facing an existential crisis, we are faced with a binary choice. And I think in the electoral zero-sum game, the binary choice would be President Trump. I think he would just be better for the core issues that are affecting me, that are affecting the American Jewish community. And the polling reflects this. President Trump is on track to receive the most Jewish votes since Dwight Eisenhower for any Republican nominee. I mean, these numbers are unheard of and is a direct result of, number one, that existential crisis I was talking about, and number two, because the Trump campaign has really been courting the Jewish vote in a way that the Harris campaign just never has. If Kamala Harris is working around the clock to secure a ceasefire deal and the return of the hostages, then I would shudder to think what 4 more years would do, because she is not working around the clock. And if she is, she's doing a pretty crappy job at that. She does not deserve our support. She does not deserve our votes. It's also telling that after 50 days of having zero policies, she doesn't outline policies, she outlines aspirations and goals. Nothing that she said on her website, in the one interview she has given, talks about the dismantling of Hamas as a terrorist organization. If a ceasefire, which again Hamas has rejected every single time, this is, if a ceasefire was agreed to, Hamas would still be in power. It would not do anything to make sure that the 45 Americans who were killed on October 7th, for the 8 American hostages still being held in Gaza, it would do nothing to ensure that that would not happen again. And it is laughable. It is laughable to say that she's working around the clock when we know that President Biden has been eating ice cream on the beaches of Delaware for almost the entirety of the summer. And if she is working around the clock, then, as I said, she's doing a bad job. And why would we want her to continue to work around the clock for 4 years when she can't even get the job done now? So we don't need what I like to call the Beetlejuicing of a ceasefire, simply stating it 3 times and hoping that it'll appear. We need bold action. And under her leadership, under her watch, 45 Americans were killed in the Middle East, 8 American hostages are still being held, and she talks nothing about dismantling of this terrorist organization to prevent this from ever happening again. I had never once experienced anti-Semitism in the United States. I'm a first-generation American, and I'm also a proud Jew, and I never saw those two as contradictory. And for the first time in my life, I was confronted with the fact that people see me as this other. And when I first testified in the United States Congress at the House Education Committee, it was pretty remarkable that the majority of the Democratic leadership didn't even show up. And then the ranking Democratic member, Bobby Scott, he used his opening remarks to criticize Republicans for focusing on anti-Semitism. We need to be combating Islamophobia. We need to be combating sexism, which is true in theory, but had nothing to do with the reality on the ground and what we were there to testify on. And I didn't want to say anything. I wanted to be bipartisan or even nonpartisan. But these incidents just kept on happening. And whether it was the House Judiciary Committee ranking member, Democrat Jerry Nadler, falling asleep when I was giving testimony, it was deeply hurtful and offensive. And again, I didn't want to say these things because I'm a Democrat, and I went to the Democratic convention with an open mind and also with a mission to sort of change my party, to steer them into a direction that would be more palpable for me and American Jewry. And it was very clear that, at least for this election in 2024, they're either unable or unwilling to make serious inroads with the American Jewish community. And that's a direct result of them taking us for granted for decades. So now I can admit it freely. When I spoke at the Republican convention, I ad-libbed a significant amount of my speech. What was on the teleprompter and what I actually said on live TV were 2 different things. And that's because I deliberately took out any explicit mentions of endorsing President Trump. Number one, I didn't necessarily believe it just yet. And number two, I wanted to show I was bipartisan. And I went to the Democratic convention and I said, look, you don't want to amplify me? I get it. Amplify Jewish students who are fighting for their civil rights on college campuses, who are experiencing unprecedented anti-Semitism. And we never got a response. They did not amplify Jewish students, and more fundamentally, they did not issue any plan that would alleviate the concerns that Jewish students are experiencing right now in real time. And that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. I'll say after my speech at the RNC, it took me about 2 hours to get back to my seat because the amount of people, delegates, ally supporters who said, we're praying for the Jewish people, or in our parish in South Dakota, we have pictures of the American hostages. People were coming up and hugging me. And at a certain point, a Republican congressman came up to me a few days ago and said, why do you insist on being in a party that just don't want you? And look, I'm still a registered Democrat. I'm not ready to throw in the towel just yet, but it's a really good question, and it's a difficult question because I don't have a very good answer just yet. I don't know if this is better or worse, but I think a significant amount of the Democratic Party are scared of electoral politics. They're scared of losing Michigan. They're scared of losing their own congressional seats, but I don't actually think they believe many of the narratives and the rhetoric that they are spewing. So when they tell Israel that it's the onus is on Benjamin Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire deal, knowing full well that Hamas has rejected every single ceasefire deal since November, I think it's simply because they're playing into their base. Again, I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but I don't think many of them believe it. Obviously, we do have congressmen and women who do believe it. We have Rashida Tlaib, we have Ilhan Omar, we have Jamal Bowman, we have Cori Bush, and that's problematic. It is not lost on me that about 5 years ago, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave his address to Congress, about 10 Democratic lawmakers walked out. And then 2 months ago, it was 110 Democratic lawmakers. So I wish I could say that this is relegated to a radical base. I wish I could say that this is relegated to a minority of the Democratic Party, but that's simply not true. The movement is only growing and gaining traction. And let me just add that the state of Israel is a progressive issue. I mean, this is a place where not only can LGBTQ individuals be full members of society, but they serve in Israeli parliament. This is a hotbed of democracy in an otherwise volatile, regressive region of the world. Israel is a vital ally that provides intelligence gatherings to the United States. So why are we delegitimizing? Why are we demoting a staunchly progressive ally? And I can't understand why my Democratic Party insists that this is proper politics. I always try to be calm, cool, and collected, but when you have the vice president of the United States who's running to be president of the United States saying that she is not going to sit and listen to a democratically elected ally, someone who is a crucial supporter and someone who means so much to the American Jewish community, I think that's just a total slap in the face, and I think it's inexcusable. I can't understand why you would not show the American Jewish community and the state of Israel and the millions of Arab and Muslim and Christian and Jewish Israeli citizens the proper respect as they are fighting for their legitimacy and as they're fighting for their very existence. Jewish Americans will be pivotal in this election. We have to remember that President Biden won states like Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania from anywhere from 13,000 to 30,000 votes. These are very small margins. The Jewish American population is anywhere from 1% to 3% of the population in those states I just mentioned. So we will be a crucial deciding factor. And what I would urge the Jewish communities across the country, what I would urge my community is we know what our issues are. Our issues are combating anti-Semitism. Our issues are the release of the American hostages in Gaza. Our issues are strengthening the bilateral U.S.-Israel relationship. And I don't think that one can reasonably and objectively assess that if those are our concerns, the Harris administration would do anything to alleviate those concerns, would do anything to benefit those policy procedures. I just don't. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but after months and months and months of trying to work with the Harris campaign, of trying to work with the White House, of trying to work with Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate, I've come to the conclusion that even though I did not support Trump in 2016, in 2020, I didn't support him 5 months ago. He is the only realistic and viable option for American Jewry. He has outlined specific policies, whether it is the withholding of federal funds to universities that violate the civil rights of Jewish students, whether it's giving Israel whatever tools they need to dismantle Hamas and release the hostages. I mean, these are practical policy solutions. And the Harris administration, or the Biden administration, Vice President Harris and her presidential campaign, have done nothing. They haven't earned our vote. They've ignored our questions, or they've given us blatantly contradictory answers, and they're taking our votes for granted. So, American Jewry, listen up. We will be the deciding factor in this election. There are enough of us in Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia, in Nevada to really sway this election. And I urge you, if you care about those policy prescriptions, if you care about the releasing of the hostages, you care about the strengthening of the U.S.-Israel relationship, you care about combating anti-Semitism on our college campuses, just look at the facts, look at the data. Harris has not outlined anything she would do specifically to alleviate those concerns. President Trump has. I get we don't like his persona. I get we don't like many of his policies. But at the end of the day, we are facing an existential issue. And I think there's only one viable choice, and that's President Trump.
Welcome back. Make sure to follow BuzzTown Times for more stories.